Yes, it's come on. I've worked out how to do all this stuff now. Loads of problems with volume. That's not to do with you. There's a pretty little dog. Right, this video is about Real-Politik and the solution. So yesterday I did a video on YouTube and it's all about the propaganda. I'm going to start there again and then work on the Real-Politik. I want to do this with an American perspective, despite being British, because I thought of a way I can see a path there, some kind of unity. To get rid of the propaganda altogether is a really difficult thing though, because the US is absolutely awash with propaganda, just like UK's and everywhere else. They really need the unity though. Propaganda places thoughts in our heads, and then we speak those thoughts thinking that they're our own thoughts, when in reality they are the propagandist's thoughts. Whatever people think when there's no propaganda present, that's real cooperation. The propaganda matrix is so vast that we don't see much of that, not when we're focused on issues. When we meet people in the streets, we see that people cooperate. It's only when something that's a propaganda matrix issue, say something to do with money came up, that would be a conflict perhaps that would be between two people who met in the street, or culture war. So when it's just normal and there's no propaganda matrix issue being spoken to people who meet in the streets, then it's not there. You see it with celebrities even on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, that cooperative spirit that they have in the jungle. You'd have to get onto an issue that has been agenda set by billionaire-owned news media for them to cause a split. Now, so the cooperation, I think, is the natural position. What is unnatural is this billionaire-owned, manufactured, huge megaphone that blasts out to millions of people around the world and then acts like we're not trying to win anyone, you know what I mean? We're not trying to provoke anyone, we're not trying to agenda set. They are. And often sometimes they admit that. Sometimes they admit that. And certainly imagine if we just say, we'll just take it away from you, then you'd soon see that they think that they should have it because they want to do them things. It's pretty obvious when you think about it. I think that whereas some things to do with the elites are maybe to do with conspiracy theory, I think this is to do power corrupts and it's common sense. People understand this. Even though they still get propagandized by it, that's because then propaganda matrix, they know the science, they know what they have to do to possess people's minds and to take away their freedom, their liberty. They don't have the public who are propagandized by this. They don't have freedom of speech. They have enslaved speech. Freedom of speech requires like equal voice. When you have freedom of speech and equal voice, I have a megaphone propaganda matrix that's trying to be some kind of Roman Empire, and you have enslaved speech. Now, this propaganda matrix stuff, it's a headache because it's so vast. It's so vast that I almost distrust any solution. But what I'm seeing in America is that more Trumpians are to the left. Trumpians are to the left of the Democrats on redistribution. You see that in studies. And these Trumpians, when they're asked it, would they vote for Robert F. Kennedy? Kennedy, think that name's a vastly popular, famous name in the Democrat world. Yet Trumpians who are meant to be Republicans say they would vote for Kennedy even more than Democrats said. So here's the Democrats voting for Robert F. Kennedy in the presidential election. Here's the Trumpians' highest score. I can't remember the exact figures. I remember its highest score. And this Trumpian thing, to the left of the Democrats on redistribution, money issues, and they're to the left of the Democrats on foreign wars, such as Russia. And Robert F. Kennedy, his narrative is all about the Democrats have lost their way, you know, they're not for the working class anymore, etc., and they're not for peace anymore. And that resonates with Trumpians. Strangely enough, Trumpians are therefore further away from, on the bread and butter economic issues, further away from their Republican libertarians, Reagan, Rand Paul, get rid of the state, get rid of all the tax and spends and redistribution. They're at opposite ends from each other. And Trumpians realise this and are willing to vote for Robert F. Kennedy. Now, this is interesting because gets into that realignment issue. My view here, interpretation of this, it doesn't matter if I'm wrong on this bit, because this is just the academic bit, is that these Trumpians are more naturally class war Democrats. And what's happened is that realignment's put them in the Republican Party. Simple as that. You see that in Britain as well. The red wall was with Johnson, now 22% behind. It was going when he was in power, though. But the red wall are equivalent to the Trumpians. They're not really, with them in their own heads. It's all propaganda, but you know what I mean? And so when people say, oh, it's amazing, isn't it? Trumpians are, if you add on Robert F. Kennedy, it's got this unity. I can see how it's happened. It doesn't matter if I'm wrong about the academic tidbit about whether they belong in the Democrats or not, these Trumpians. It doesn't matter. It's the same. My point's still well made that Robert F. Kennedy and these Trumpians are together. They're together because the votes are going to all pile in there. Now, there's another point here about Trumpian support for one of Andrew Yang's policies, which is universal basic income. They support it. Republican Reaganites and Rand Paul types hate it, can't stand it, call it socialist and all this. But Trumpians support Andrew Yang's universal basic income policy. And therefore, Andrew Yang's quite popular as well with them. But the difference between Yang and Robert F. Kennedy is that these Trumpians are focusing on one issue with Yang. And also Yang is not a presidential contender. Nevertheless, it's interesting because Robert F. Kennedy is considering universal basic income, having talked to lots of techies. So if Robert F. Kennedy decides yes to UBI, and even more those Trumpians will get behind him, and you'll have this city Democrat vote plus Trumpians on top, which is amazing for Robert F. Kennedy, that is. And yeah, just to underline the point, them Trumpians are very keen on Robert F. Kennedy. Now, I'm not on about Donald Trump, by the way, in him himself. I think he's mentally ill. I think he's crazy. So an example of that would be we need to get rid, for me, of the news media. And that sounds Trumpian at first, but I don't mean send them bombs, chance scum at them at rallies, and get rid of the political class by storming Congress and stuff like that, and taking Nancy Pelosi hostage and having violence outside and trying to start a civil war. My way of getting the news media down is much different. It's anti-monopoly laws. So it's very severe anti-monopoly laws, though, past this wishy-washy tinkering political world. So very severe anti-monopoly laws that make news media small but competitive. So that's to get that free speech that's equal speech, not free speech when really it's enslaved speech because it's propagandized into your head for their benefit, for their wealth at the top, for the billionaire news media owners. That's not what I mean. So I don't mean the Trumpian stuff, and nor do I mean just have free speech and let the billionaires dictate everything. No, we get rid of that kind of world. we need to be getting back to the propaganda for just a second. We need to always keep in mind that we've got to reflect on ourselves. We're all prone to propaganda getting in here. So it's not about identifying with Robert F. Kennedy or Yang or Trumpians. It's about getting rid of propaganda, peace and equality, unity. Because this propaganda stuff's the opposite of unity. It wears unity clothes, pretends it's for that. Well, they're never doing it, never, ever, because they don't want that. Now, if we get rid of the news media, the national news media, I'm not about local news media, get rid of national news media, we get rid of the political class in terms of the politicians. When I say political class here, someone about the stereotype political class that people comes to mind first, because we're getting rid of the news media, so that's sort of the political class. But I'm on about specifically now the politicians, their world, Parliament, Downing Street, Congress, White House. So how on earth would you do that? And here we borrow from another idea of Andrew Yang's, which is people's courts. Now, people's courts must be we want it to be a boring idea. We're not trying to be dramatic drama queens or anything like that. We want it to be a boring idea, because politics isn't meant to be showbiz. Nevertheless, a boring idea it is, but does it work? That's what I want it to do. So it gets to the cooperation, people. So Yang describes people's courts as akin to juries, because he's seen that it's more mature. Juries, you don't have all this stupid propaganda. So it's a big challenge for us, because on the one hand, I'm wanting to get rid of the state superstructure, but here I am going on about RFK, dynasty in the US, Trumpian, fresh in their mind enough, isn't it? And added on to that, he's quite famous in America, Andrew Yang, and his universal basic income policy and his people courts. So this is why you have to keep in mind the propaganda, because you can't start identifying with these. You know what I mean? Have to if someone could come along and say, how do we get beyond that even? It'd be excellent. I mean, we've created this bloody mess of mass propaganda, and it's all from that all the mess comes. They're the ones going on about getting the narrative in everyone's head. So if you think the word propaganda is a bit strong, just say the word narrative then. They're the ones getting in here all the time. They don't spout this out not to try and be influential. It's real. It's a problem. But in the US term, and it's interesting to do the US first, because the UK tends to copy. See what I mean? They tend to copy. I don't know why that is. There we go. So this isn't a substitute for doing the work on yourself. Propaganda in your own head, because when I go on like this, I'm obviously thinking about when I'm going on about the RFKs and the Robert F. Kennedy, Trumpian, Yang. Obviously, I'm thinking about trying to work out how it is that we can get unity in the US, and I'm thinking like, oh, Trumpians are to the left of the Democrats. The support RFK, it's showing me that they are old Democrat in their economics. That's what it is. And they like UBI, and they like it to be high level. Trumpians are clearly left wing on economics. And RFK's narrative is all about how America's become too unequal and obsessed with war and plowing billions into the defense industry. And he wants to get it to people. Now, so this Trumpian, Robert F. Kennedy, Democrat Trump consensus has a massive potential. And then you bring in other stuff. like disliking the news media and all that, and you're thinking there's a hope there. But see, they're here today, gone tomorrow. So you have to do the hard work of not just focusing on your own propaganda in your own mind, but collectively in terms of making this sustainable. Because if they just go into power, right, and they just say, it's okay now, it's okay, we're not in the foreign wars, we're redistributive, then you're just going to maintain the wheels going round. So the other lot just have to wait till you become unpopular, they come in, and then they say, well, we didn't see any problem with this state superstructure, we quite liked it, we liked it more than you lot. We liked it, we preferred that to having you in power. So then it just goes back to the same old state superstructure propaganda matrix and all the problems that we had in the first place, risking annihilation of the human race in war, and also getting back to that Republican tax cut for the billionaires and millionaires and slashing the state for everyone else to create more inequality, and then to culture war that by dividing the working class so that they don't fight back because they're too weakened by the culture war. And that's what we've seen played out every day forever, so to speak. I mean, it's not just now, you've seen it, that's how it's always gone. So what you need to do is to make it sustainable. Sustainable is to get rid of the propaganda. And if we don't get rid of the propaganda, it's no good saying, oh, we're here, we're not going to do any of that crap. You must be seen to get rid of the propaganda, even if you're telling the truth that you wouldn't do it yourself. Because if you don't get rid of the propaganda, then it's as obvious as it will rain again in England that you'll get propaganda returning and the same problems re-emerging. So this stuff I say about Robert F. Kennedy, Trumpians, and Andrew Yang is it's what I said about it. I think is true, but you must get it so it's a sustainable end of the propaganda world. They must get rid of the propaganda state in the US. The state US is it's a military state, it's an oligarchy, it's a secret state, it's a propaganda matrix. All that must end. That doesn't end, I don't mean end for 4 or 5 years or for 2-term presidency. I mean it must end forever. That is what needs to happen. And therefore my ideas about realpolitik are in that context. They're like this for now, but these people who come in for now must think about the forevermore. So they must make that sustainable forevermore. So that contextualizes the worldview I've got about the view I've got about the realpolitik. It puts realpolitik is realistic politics in the US for now, but it has to be, to make it realpolitik forever requires work. It requires this to be done properly, because otherwise, I mean, to say Robert F. Kennedy would be the top man in this Robert F. Kennedy, Trumpian, Andrew Yang thing, right? Well, that Kennedy, he hasn't to be sat there proud thinking, oh, see, we're going to get peace and equality, but he'll be thinking in the back of his mind, yeah, until the next lot come along when I'm gone after 1 or 2 terms. He needs to make it so that it is forever. It's crucial, because otherwise we're just going to end up in bloody civil wars, world wars, everything, because this propaganda cannot go on forever. It is just a disgrace. It is evil. It is scum. It is vile. It must end. End the video.